Tech News Weekly is sponsored by Hover.com. Domain names made simple. Go to gfq.hover.com and get 10% off your entire purchase. And by Stitcher Radio. Listen on the go via the Stitcher mobile app. For more information, go to stitcher.com/GFQ.
Starting Tech News Weekly in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome everybody to Tech News Weekly. I'm your host Andrew Zarian, and as always, I'm joined by the mouth of the South, Suncast. How you doing, Suncast?
The South? I'm not even in the South.
I don't know. I was
Unless you
watching
want to say South Detroit or something
South
like that.
Detroit, the mouth of South Detroit. How you doing? How you doing, Suncast?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Very excited. We over here at the GFQ Network are getting ready to broadcast live from Blog World all next week. Well, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday we'll be there.
Yes.
So it's a big thing. Some of the studio is taken apart in pieces already.
Also, you're actually starting to get stuff ready.
Yeah. So we have, all our remote stuff ready. We have to tear apart the lighting. The microphones, surprisingly, are staying here because we have so many extra microphones. We have extra wires. So we have an entire area dedicated in the studio just to harvest all of the extra stuff leaving the studio. For our long-term viewers, last year we had to literally tear apart the entire studio.
A lot of prep to do.
And we've been doing a lot of prep. We have all our. I am a little too prepared this year, and I'm really panicking because I don't believe the fact that I'm ready for this.
Never are.
You know what I mean?
Never are. I mean, it just with one of those things, you can't account for every single thing.
No, but the thing is, I'm actually concerned because I feel that I'm ready already, and that doesn't make sense to me. Like, I feel like I'm leaving something out.
It's very possible.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a big thing. So we're broadcasting from the Jacob Javits Center in New York City for Blog World 2012. You could still buy tickets. You could come down. You could buy tickets there. June 5th, 6th, and the 7th, we will be there. The first day we're setting up. We're building the booth. The IAIB will also be there. Stitcher Radio is there, which is great this year because they're right next to us. So it's a lot of stuff happening. I'm very excited about Blog World this year. And you're coming.
Yep.
Live and in person.
Yep. It'll be awesome.
Yeah. So we're getting ready to do that.
I'm excited about it because we'll finally get to do some stuff in person.
Yeah. We actually have a lot of work here to do. Surprisingly, things need to get done at the GFQ Network. And I'm actually upset because now I can't just throw it onto Suncast and just
I mean, I'm
leave
just
and
a
drink.
little worried here that you're going to shove me in the basement and never let me out again.
Well, that's what happened. Jess, prep the basement for Suncast. Get the chain. Get the handcuffs. He's not going back.
I'm going to have to borrow Spencer's bodyguards to make sure that you don't have any chloroform.
Yeah, we're going to chloroform you and keep you down there. That's actually the goal with this. Why do you think I'm paying so much? But there is some tech news to get to. It's not all about us here at the GFQ Network. I do want to go into the news, but I do want to remind everybody that we need you guys to subscribe to our shows. That way you're up to date. We are constantly providing you with the content. It helps us out here. If you go to iTunes, Zune, you can hit the subscribe button, and you can subscribe to Tech News Weekly and each and every one of our shows here at the GFQ Network. So I urge everybody to do that. Also, we have a great chat room here at gfqlive.tv. Great group of people in there. Come join the chat and communicate with us. I want to go to the big story this week. Microsoft released a new version, an updated version of Windows 8. The release, what is it? The release preview, right?
Yes.
It is the release preview of Windows 8 tweaks to the operating system. I have it installed on one of my older laptops, and I could tell you it is a lot quicker. You know, some of the applications that would take a little while to load, it's a quicker operating system. Metro, there's more apps in the Metro App Store. Did they fix that dual monitor issue?
They've made several improvements to their dual monitor support. They had a blog that outlined several of the things that they did. One of the things you can do, or one of the things that they did do, was make that little 4-pixel area just a little bit bigger. But then they also use this thing called a catcher, so that when your mouse over near that area, it'll actually drag your mouse cursor over to that area, so it's a little bit easier to get to those targets.
So is it easier now? What have you noticed?
I can't tell you for sure because I'm not necessarily in a traditional dual monitor setup.
Okay.
I use Mouse Without Borders to connect both my computers together, so it's not technically a dual monitor, but it is a dual monitor. So I think that those improvements, I'm not seeing those improvements because of that, but I think if I actually had two monitors plugged into the computer, it would work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay.
From the video that I did see of that in action, it does look like it's better.
So I've been playing around with it since yesterday on this laptop, and I'm still, and not to criticize it yet because I know it's not finalized, and I know they're still tweaking things, but
it's the release.
It's the release preview.
There's not a whole lot they're going to change, if anything, from now until it's released.
I thought I would have, the closer we got to the release date, the more comfortable I would be with this operating system. I would have gotten used to it by now. But I haven't. And that's a little concerning considering the fact that I should be used to this thing. And I'm not the average user. We're
such
enthusiasts.
A drastically different operating system than what you're used to. Even with Mac OS, it's a very different operating system.
Yes, it's very different than the Mac OS. But you know what the biggest problem I have is? My wrist gets tired when using the trackpad with Windows 8.
Oh yeah, because you have to you tend to use that a lot more.
You're going side by side a lot more. It's not these small movements. You're not just doing little small movements. You have to slide sideways constantly, and I feel that my wrist is getting tired. Now, I'm not necessarily used to the trackpad on this laptop that I'm using. It's a couple of years old. It's not a high-end laptop. So I could attribute, let's attribute it to the fact that it doesn't have a great trackpad, but you also have to consider the fact that most people are not going and buying the top of the line laptop or top of the line, whatever is on the market. They're buying the mid-range or the $399, $499 laptop. So this is concerning me. And this thing that I've been saying about the trackpad being a very vital part of your experience with this operating system, I still stand by that, and I think it's going to be a big problem for a lot of people. It's hard for me to explain it to people that aren't really using this with a laptop.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I think and most people that watch us know that I'm very skeptical and am not in the boat of Microsoft when it comes to Windows 8. I'm not. I've used the developer preview. I've used all the previews so far, and the release preview being the latest now. I haven't used it all that much. I just installed it today. That's when I had time. But I can definitely see that there are improvements over the last preview that they have done. The consumer preview.
There is. No, definitely. But the biggest problem is, I mean, Paul Thurrott from Win Superside, also from What the Tech and Windows Weekly. Paul and I do a show on Tuesdays here at the GFK Network. Cheap plug. Boom. He believes that it's attributed to the drivers. He's saying that, the drivers aren't there yet. The drivers aren't there yet. A lot of these third-party companies
I think that's partly true.
Okay, partly true, but
there's a lot of things that aren't there yet. This is an operating system that I believe, when it launches, is not going to be as successful as it could be. That's partly due to it being such a new, different, radically different type of operating system than anybody's used to. And because of that, software and hardware are not going to work as well as it could.
See,
until it's out for a while, we're not going to have everything tweaked for that operating system, for Windows 8.
I wouldn't say this is going to fail, because regardless of what the operating system is, it's still going to sell millions and millions and millions, because computers are sold with it, and a lot of people are going to buy computers. So and plus, considering the fact that this is also going to be on tablets, the numbers are gonna double what they are for Windows 7. Okay, it's going to be a whole. If we're talking numbers game, it's going to beat Windows 7. You're going to hear that a lot. But let's talk about hardware. Let's talk about the physical trackpad on this device. The physical trackpad, if it's not a good trackpad that they're putting on this laptop,
you keep seeing this.
I do. But
the problem with what you're saying there is that that's not possible.
What's not possible?
it's not possible for every single laptop to have a good trackpad.
Yes.
If they're leaving this up to manufacturers to actually put in a good trackpad, that's just not possible because these manufacturers are going to find ways to cut costs, and that's one of the ways they find.
No.
costs.
Absolutely. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but
So
it's
then
going
that's
to be
going to sour the user
Exactly.
experience for this operating system.
Exactly. And people do not understand what I mean. I don't know if that's because they're using higher end laptops with very good trackpads, or they're not using a trackpad at all. I know many people that use the mouse. The experience with the mouse is totally different than the trackpad. The
Yeah,
trackpad is
absolutely.
the trackpad is closer to the experience you're going to get if you're touching the device.
But
I'm
at
just
the same
concerned
time,
about
there's even on a laptop or a desktop, there are people like myself that would prefer to use the keyboard as much as possible, and I think that they have created a lot of new keyboard shortcuts, but at the same time, I'm not sure that it's really set up for somebody that's a power user of the keyboard to
I was gonna
navigate
ask
around
you.
the operating system.
I was
I
gonna
still
ask
find
you
it
this.
pretty difficult to do.
Do you use the keyboard shortcuts in your everyday usage, or are you more, you click around?
I do. It's a little bit of both. There are certain things that are much easier to do just from the keyboard than it is with the mouse. But then again, you can also say that there are certain tasks that are so much easier to do with the mouse than it is with the
Yeah.
keyboard.
Yeah, I'm just very concerned about this. And listen, the closer we get, we are not the real world environment. We're enthusiasts. I'm really curious to see how the mainstream is going to represent Windows and what they're going to say and how they're going to use
This
it.
very much could be like Vista, because if you remember, I think one of the things that people said that ruined Vista for everybody was that the hardware just was not there when it launched.
Well, you know
And
what?
I think
But
we could very well have the same thing happen with Windows 8, where we don't necessarily have the hardware or necessarily the software now because they're using this new Metro UI environment when it launches. So I don't know, and I don't think it will be as successful as it could be because of that.
people compare this to Vista, and Vista was far easier to accept than this. Vista was
Yes.
was a failure not because of the operating system, because as you said, when they released it, it was sluggish, it was slower than XP, it had high CPU specs that it wanted, so it wasn't really there. But they fixed it by SP1. I mean, they fixed Vista. They cannot fix the entire UI in a service pack update. If it fails. But listen, I don't think it's going to fail.
Look, Microsoft could end up having a come to Jesus type of moment after they release this, and it doesn't do as well as they expect.
Yeah, and
they might have so much negative feedback on certain areas where they actually do cave in and change things for a way that they didn't necessarily want to.
So
Microsoft does have this idea of what they want Windows 8 to be. They're trying to push people into a direction that they want to go, and not necessarily the direction that people are going now or that the people want to go.
Well, here's also the issue. There's no plan B.
Yeah.
What do you do? They don't have a plan B. This is it. So we're going to see how this plays out.
I can definitely see how Windows 8
yeah,
makes a lot of sense for a portable device, a tablet,
yeah.
for example. I think Windows 8 will be great for a tablet, great for a smartphone kind of deal. I don't see it as big of a deal for laptops or desktops. I can kind of see it maybe for laptops, but I mean, just when it's the difference in usage styles. You use a laptop and a desktop much differently than you do
Yeah.
a smartphone or a tablet.
No,
They're
you
two
do.
different computing styles.
Did you read the story about? I think it's in our notes. I'm not too sure, but there's it's a weird story, but they're gonna put the desktop apps in the App Store.
Yeah, it's kind of yes and no. What they're not actually including desktop applications in the store anymore. There's actually two little parts to this. One is that they will actually list desktop apps in the Windows stores, which will end up just taking you to the developer site where you can download it. But they're also saying that any application that you do submit to the Windows Store has to have keyboard support for it so that it can be used on a desktop.
Okay.
It's kind of
So it
I
makes
think it's
sense.
kind of got to be vice versa too, where
Yeah.
an application that you submit has to be touch enabled.
It's going to be. I'm just really, really curious on how this is going to play out. come August 1st or the first week in August when they release this.
It'll be really interesting to see, and it could be a couple months before we actually see how well it's doing. Because if you remember, when they release these things, they take a good long while to actually calculate the data and what's going on. If you remember when Windows 7 was released, there was all kinds of rumors about how well it was doing. There was no exact numbers, or numbers were kind of being thrown out, but nobody knew which numbers were actually true, which were accurate, how they were counted, or anything like that. So it's going to be a couple months after this Windows 8 is released before we actually know what's really happening in terms of success.
Yeah. So, we're definitely going to follow up on this. I do want to go to this RIM story. RIM may be cutting 2,000 more jobs within the next 2 weeks. The story broke a couple of weeks ago. They were facing, a number of layoffs. Did they do the first round of layoffs?
I'm not sure. They're saying that they could cut upwards of as many as 6,000 people.
Well, I think we ran the HP story last week that HP was cutting thousands of jobs.
27,000.
And we discussed these companies that have gotten bloated over the last couple of years, and it's awful that they're cutting, but they have gotten bloated.
They're bloated, and they're losing money left and right.
And they're losing money left and right. And a company like RIM that was extremely dominant in the early 2000s with their platform.
They've been losing money I don't know that they necessarily are losing money. They're just not generating nearly as much money as they once were, where they could support a larger number of employees.
I was thinking about what RIM could possibly do to save that company, and
what they're going to do is BlackBerry 10.
Well, BlackBerry 10 is their Hail Mary, but what they should do is only have 2 phones on the market.
I agree with that.
Have one with a keyboard and one without a keyboard, and that's it. And every 8 months or 10 months, you do the refresh of those versions. One with a keyboard and one without a keyboard. Mm-hmm. Instead of releasing 1,500 phones every couple a year, they're releasing a lot of phones.
I'll tell you what's really confusing is that
the numbering.
Recently you're seeing a lot of stories about the BlackBerry 9230 and 9330, which are essentially the same phone, but they're lower budget phones that are being launched in Europe. But we've been hearing about these 2 particular phones for probably the past year or so, and they still haven't released these yet. That's really confusing that they actually have different models for different carriers. 9230, 9330. They're essentially the same thing, but it's always talked about as it's 2 separate phones.
No, they're gonna have to cut jobs. They're gonna have to cut back on the platforms that they're representing, the different types of phones that they have, and who gets what. It's extremely confusing, and this is a company that is possibly going to end up like Palm. Maybe someone is going to buy them out, or they may be extremely successful.
They need to go back and stick to kind of what they're good at, and I think back then they weren't coming out with nearly as many variations. I don't think. It was like, every 6 months you're seeing another variation of a device they released 6 months before that.
But why do people buy BlackBerry? I think that's part of the
problem. And you see that exacerbated it with the Android universe, where they're actually having new Android devices every single month. It's kind of the same deal. A little bit slower, but the same thing.
So let me ask you this, because you have a BlackBerry, but, you're I don't consider you a BlackBerry guy, but what drives a average consumer? I'm not talking about a guy with that needs enterprise support and is in a work environment. I'm talking about the average person. What made them go and buy a BlackBerry? It was BlackBerry Messenger, right?
That was one of them.
BBM.
Yes.
BBM was
email. The keyboard.
The keyboard and BBM, really. I mean, that's what really drove a lot of people to go buy a BlackBerry.
It has never, ever been about touch when it comes to BlackBerry. Nobody has ever, in my opinion, gone out in droves because BlackBerry has a touch-enabled device. You've seen that with Storm. You've seen that with their torches. You just don't hear about those touch-enabled devices the same way as you do with Windows phones and the iPhone and Android phones.
Yeah. No, I'm just
you hear
I'm
about
just
that sort of hype and whatnot when you're talking about their more traditional keypad devices.
Yeah. No, with their keypad stuff, yeah. So they're cutting back on 2,000 jobs within the next 2 weeks. This is just showing where they're going. HP also cut jobs, and that's not good either. So
when you're not doing very well, that's one of the things you just have to do. It's very sad that people are going to lose their jobs, but at the same time, the company has to survive.
Yeah, they do. You want to go? You want to go into this AT&T store because I think you've been following it a little bit more than me.
The data
The
plans
toll
one?
free, yeah, the toll free data plan.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I didn't pick this necessarily for what the story was about, but for one of the things that the CEO said. So the AT&T CEO Stephen Randall came out and said some stuff today or recently about how they think that the future will also be data-only plans, which for me is a no-brainer. This is something that a lot of people, a lot of phone enthusiasts have been wanting for a long time. Is the option for data-only, and I think.
Yeah.
In some ways, you can get that right now, but it's never really generally been something that they've promoted.
So you're talking about, you don't get text messaging, don't get very, very basic phone services, but go heavy on the data, and just that's what you need the phone for is data.
Right. And then one of the other things he said, he talked more about how they think that toll-free data plans are likely in development for the next 12 months. And this is really funny because it says customers are starting to avoid some data-heavy content in response to tiered data pricing. No kidding. Who would have thought that?
Yeah.
Who would have thought that? Oh, well, yeah. Now that we have these tiers and these data caps, people aren't using data as much. Wasn't that the reason why you did that?
So they're saying
Isn't
because
that the whole point why you have tiers and data caps so that people don't use nearly as much? So now that they're not using nearly as much, you're mad because they're not using applications nearly as much. I don't get that. You're telling us don't use this kind of data. Don't use so much data. Oh, I want you to use data.
So what is he saying? What is a toll-free data plan?
Toll-free is where they actually have an application that is exempt from data caps.
Yeah, here
so
it
that
is.
if you're using Spotify or the GFQ network application, you can technically get as much data from that particular application as much as you want, and it won't count towards your data cap whatsoever.
Hasn't Sprint been doing this with their Sprint TV service and their Sprint rate? They have a whole bunch of like Sprint apps that I
They
thought.
probably do. I don't know the specifics when it comes to Sprint, though.
Yeah, I could have swore that they were exempt of certain
But this
things.
is the problem when you implement these sort of things. You're implementing these things because you say that people are using too much data, or it's constraining the resources on the network. But at the same time, now you're talking about having these toll-free, data exempt applications that people can use as much data as they want, and it won't count towards their data.
Have they hinted on what applications?
Isn't that
would be?
completely the opposite thinking there?
It is.
Don't use all this data. Oh, wait, you can use as much data as you want with this application. It won't hurt our network. Isn't that the same freaking thing?
Well, now, have they hinted at what applications they're talking about?
No, they're just talking about, things that use, video. A lot of video and streaming services use a lot of data.
I mean, so what's probably going to happen is that they're going to link up with a company that's going to pay AT&T X amount, and they're going to. Now, is this the one where we're talking about? Like, you're going to have to pay the application, or they're just saying these are going to be free apps that don't go towards your data cap?
We don't know for sure the specifics. As far as how they're going to actually roll this out, when they roll this out, and all that sort of stuff. They were talking about whether or not if these applications have to pay, or they're just going to completely exempt it whatsoever, and you won't have to pay. I think that's what it comes down to. Is I think it won't be as big of a deal so long as you don't, or the carrier doesn't have to, not the carrier, but the application developer doesn't have to pay to make sure that application is exempt.
Listen, maybe it's not a bad idea that they have exempt apps. What if they said, okay, you know what, Netflix, Hulu, and YouTube are exempt?
You have to now that you have these data caps because, as it says, people are now watching how much they use. Well, of course they are. They have a data cap. And you have all these ridiculous overages, and
it's almost
all
like they're
these fees,
surprised.
And it's just a bunch of ridiculous crap now.
It's almost like they're surprised at this. They're surprised at the fact that people are actually following up and they're listening to them.
Yeah.
I do want to move on to a few things. Tim Cook sat down at the D10 conference, the D10, and he was interviewed, and he said some interesting things. One thing that he said that I don't think you have on the notes is he was talking about Steve Jobs and how Steve Jobs could sit down and spin an entire story to the point that the thing that he said he hated, he would turn that around on you and say how great it is.
Yeah.
And he was a master of this. And he had some interesting stories about how, he told him not to be like him. He was talking about Walt Disney, and when Disney died, everybody sat around thinking, well, what would Walt do? And he didn't want that mindset for Apple because nobody would be innovating. They would be thinking as Steve. But he did say a couple things. He did comment that he does want to bring Apple products to the U.S. as far as manufacturing goes. One of the things that he wants to do is include glass for the iPhone to be made in Kentucky, as well as the CPUs and the iPhone and iPad made in Austin. Texas by Samsung. Cook indicated that he hopes final assembly could be done in the U.S. also. So I guess this is actually a really good thing. And, Apple has always prided itself where it says, designed in California. But I guarantee you many people that read that think that it was made in California. I actually had this discussion with somebody recently. They were talking about how they love Apple because everything in Apple is made in the USA. They turn around.
There's been so many stories about Apple and Foxconn lately that I don't understand how anybody could not know that.
This relative of mine has gone on this Apple kick, and she has bought everything Apple. Apple laptop, iPad, phone, everything Apple. And I said, well, how come you decided to go to Apple? He goes, oh, I like it because it's made in the U.S. And I go, it's not made in the U.S. What are you talking about? And they go, no, it says made in USA. I'm like, no, it says designed in California. And she goes, well, yeah, same thing.
Different things.
She goes, same thing. I go, no, it's not. It's made somewhere in China, and they're notorious, the factory that they're getting all the parts with for all this inhumane environment that they put their workers through.
I would think it would be a well-known thing by now.
I don't think people pay attention, John.
I mean,
I don't think
we have seen
attention.
this sort of thing covered in the mainstream media. It's not that it's only in the tech circles or anything like that anymore. It is in the mainstream media.
So what do you think of the story that they want to bring manufacturing? They want to bring the Apple
I don't
products
think
to the
you'd
States.
find anybody that would object to that, other than the fact that I think we all realize that that's easier said than done. There are many, 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 many more factors that go along with actually making that happen than actually just saying that. It's one thing to think and say, I would love for all the manufacturing and assembly to be done here in the U.S., but to actually make that happen at a cost-effective way is a whole different thing.
Do you think that would, and this is an interesting concept, and I do feel, this is something that I've said, that manufacturing jobs, a lot of these jobs are slowly going to start coming back here because it's still extremely, extremely inexpensive for these companies to take out, all these, they're breaking every labor law in the state in the country possible, and what they do over there, but because they're starting to unionize slowly in those countries, and they're starting to demand higher salaries. I don't think they're doing it because they want to do it for the good of this country. They're doing it because it's starting to get a little expensive for them there, and how can they spin this so they're looking like the good guys when they exit out and they bring it back to the States? It's an interesting thing that they're doing, but I think it's a great idea to bring it here. Why not?
Do you think, or are you worried that if or when that happens, that the cost for Apple products will go up?
No, I don't think it'll go up because I think they're talking about assembly. I know they're talking about the glass that's manufactured for the iPhone. They're saying it might be made in Kentucky. I know that they do make chipsets here anyway, and it doesn't impact the price. But I think initially what they'll do is bring the assembly here and then slowly bring everything to see if they could balance everything.
Well, that's happening now. There was a company here, a local company. I can't remember what the name of it, but they make TVs they make TVs, and they were assembling them in another country, I think Mexico or something like that. But it's gotten to the point where it's so costly there as well that it's just easier to do things here, have everything here locally in the States. And it was really interesting because they had the president of the company saying, yeah, because of all these factors, it makes more sense for us to actually assemble here in the United States, which is great because we can actually bring jobs back to the United States.
What was that other story that Tim Cook? He said something else when he sat down with.
Yeah, they're saying that
Walt.
they're going to double down on secrecy and be super transparent when it comes to other things. What they mean by that is that when it comes to, their suppliers such as Foxconn and the working conditions there, they're going to be more transparent or be as transparent as they can be when it comes to those things. But when it comes to products, they are going to be as secretive as they can get.
Well, yeah. I mean, is what's new here. I mean,
That's what I don't understand. Like, they aren't already super secretive when it comes to this sort of thing.
Yeah. There's some other Apple stories that broke out this week. One story that came out today was that Apple's going to include Facebook integration in iOS 6. For the longest time, they have not had Facebook integration. They just added Twitter integration, which was great for the iOS 5. But for iOS 6, they're now going to include Facebook integration in iOS 6. And
do you think it needs to be integrated?
Yeah, they have to. You know what's interesting with Android? Android had Facebook integration for a while, and all your Facebook buddies, all the Facebook information was syncing up, and then they added Twitter integration.
That was when Google was still rolling out and connecting all their services with Android.
Yeah, well, and then they removed the Facebook integration. Now they have removed Twitter integration.
Mm-hmm.
And
they want
Apple's
you to use Google.
Because they want
you
to
have
use
Google
Google
Plus, and they have Google Contacts, and they have Gmail and all that stuff. They want you to use Google. I don't necessarily blame them for that, but at the same time, I'd like to be given a choice.
They're also saying that in iOS 6, redesigned to iTunes Store, App Store, and iBookstore. So all the stores are getting a redesign also in iOS 6. Have you seen the leaked images of the 4-inch iPhone?
It looks a little weird.
It's
long.
At
least compared to what you're used to seeing.
Yeah, it's very
it looks
long.
A little weird.
I mean, you're talking about a 16:9 screen. It's a long screen. But they have to go bigger, and it looks great. The overall design of this thing looks excellent.
I think it would be shocking if they did not go bigger.
I don't think they're going thinner either. They're not going as far as the thickness goes. I think they're staying the same.
I don't think people necessarily care about as thin as possible as much as they do these days.
No, I don't think so. I
mean, I think it's become more important as far as what the phone can do than how big or how small it is.
I don't know. It's a great phone. I mean, I constantly recommend this phone to people, and everybody tells me, well, why do you have an Android phone? I'm already engulfed in the iOS environment. I don't need another iOS
And
device.
you'll get the fanboys out there that say that they're like with Android, and they're like, why would anybody want an iPhone?
See, I don't
Android can do so much more. Android can multitask. iPhone can't.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Yeah, but you know what? You can still make a phone call with iOS.
Oh, but the phone call quality is so bad compared to Android.
No, that's not true. It's awful. My phone is awful. It's just so bad. The battery life is awful. It's just really bad. 9 to 5 Max applied, and those leaked images, and I have it in our chat room. Suncast, go into another story.
Let's see. Which other stories do we have here? Well, this is something that related to what we were just talking about, and that's the fact that earlier today, Facebook went down for a couple hours. We were not exactly sure yet what happened. Facebook is being pretty secretive and nonchalant about what exactly happened, which makes people question as far as why they went down or what happened. But at the same time, I'm thinking it was only down for an hour or two, and people are screaming bloody murder here. Can we actually live without Facebook? If Facebook in the within the end of the year, if Facebook ceased to exist,
let's say they just shut down.
People continue on with their lives. Would they be able to function without Facebook?
Yeah, see, that's a very interesting story.
Are we so dependent on Facebook that we cannot live our lives without it?
Well, have we become too reliant on these services? That's the question.
Yeah.
Have we become too reliant? Why have we become this reliant on this thing? I know for a fact that people are freaking out, and you can see it on Twitter. People started going to Twitter and complaining that there's no their account is down,
and it was down for at most 2 hours.
Yeah. Why, now they're not saying why they went down, right?
No, they said it's not related to anybody. Well, they said that Anonymous was not responsible for anything that happened. That's
Okay.
all we know. We don't know exactly the details, which is why people are like, this is a little interesting because normally they tell you.
Yeah.
So there are people out there questioning exactly what happened because Facebook isn't being very direct about what happened. But like I said, it's very interesting that people are screaming bloody murder over this simply because it was down for an hour or two. I mean, if Facebook ceased to exist by the end of the year, do you think you could live your life normally?
If Facebook was gone, yeah. I mean, I would be able to definitely exist.
Now,
I mean,
let's
I
spin
don't
this
know- I
around
don't
and
know
let me
how-
ask you, because we use Facebook here at GFQ to promote everything that we do.
Yeah. As a
How do you
promotional
think that
tool.
would change?
Well, are we still talking about Twitter existing? Because Twitter is more of a promotional tool for me than Facebook is at this point.
Really?
Yeah. I'm more of a Twitter user now than I am Facebook, especially when it comes
But then
to
why
promoting.
is that? Why do you use Twitter more than you do use Facebook? Because technically they're kind of the same premise where you update and you post status messages.
I don't know. I like
Do you just
Twitter
find it
better.
easier to use Twitter over Facebook?
Yeah, I feel I could promote something that I'm doing on my Twitter. I use them for totally different things. My Twitter account is for my show and things that, with whatever stuff that I'm talking about with the show, and I'll comment on certain things that other broadcasters are doing. I don't necessarily use that for Facebook. Facebook, I use it as a photo album. I just upload all my photos to Facebook. I
That's
use
interesting.
the two services for two separate things.
So-
And I don't see Facebook as that big of an important tool when it comes to promoting whatever I'm doing. I like Twitter more than that. And maybe that's just me. I mean, what do you think? Do you use them both in the same way?
I kind of use them both in the same way. I'm like you. I actually end up using Twitter a little bit more. But that's just because I tweet stupid crap all day long. That's what it comes down to for me.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to annoy all my friends on Facebook with all my stupid crap that I tweet.
Yeah, I guess that's why. I mean, a lot of people use. Do you use Google Plus? Because Google Plus
Not at all.
is more of a detailed posting service. You're not limited to.
That's the
140
funny thing
characters.
too is that up until about 2-3 weeks ago, I would actually take the time and the effort to actually go to Google Plus and actually promote some of the stuff that I was involved with. And now it's gotten to the point where I don't see any reason why to go and use Google Plus. I don't think I'm getting anything from it. Why should I waste my time with Google Plus when everybody that would even care is on Facebook or Twitter?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's. Do you think there's going to be another person that comes into play?
Down the road, it's very, very, very possible, I think. It's not something that I think would be impossible
Yeah.
because let's face it, anything can change. I mean, if you look at how the fact that everybody thought that MySpace was king and that MySpace would be around forever, and now MySpace what?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know who. MySpace failed on their own. I don't think they failed because. I guess the same could go for all these services. It's surprising to think that, Twitter survived all of this and they're still a competitor and they're still in the game when it comes to Facebook.
Absolutely.
It's interesting to think that. I have a couple things I would like to go into. One, we have to, once again, I want to remind everyone, we're going to be at Blog World 2012.
I'm going to be there.
Suncast is going to be there. I'm going to be there. You can stop by
You
at
can
the
come
Jacob
see
Javits
me.
Center in New York City. We're going to be broadcasting from there for 3 days. So we're packing up the studio. Next week's schedule is going to be a little off, but we'll be. And then I'm taking off for a week. I'm going on vacation. And then we'll be back to our regular schedule once everything is settled. But I do want to remind everybody that. Also, we have to do our picks of the week, Suncast. I have an interesting pick. I know you have an interesting pick. My pick is an application for the Mac called iStat Pro. There's this. You could go to. I think what's the website? iStat.
iSlayer.
iSlayer. Okay, let me just go there and I'll tell you. iSlayer.
I think it should be on my camera now.
Okay, so here it is. There you go. Oh, what happened here? There we
Oh,
go.
I had to click off a
Okay.
screen.
I thought that was me. So, iStat Pro is the app. Can you click on Mac for me?
Where's that? Right at
Right
top?
there. So they offer different services. So I use the app called iStat Menu, and I use iStat Pro. And the reason why I like this is because it tells me my computer's vitals right on top of my toolbar. On the top of the Mac bar, I guess they're gonna call it. So it gives you your CPU temperature, how much bandwidth you're using, how much memory you're using, your CPU usage, your hard drive usage. It gives you all those stats. But the cool thing is when you use iStat Pro, which I believe comes in the package. If you buy iMenu, I think you're in there. That is really cool because it gives you the vitals for your battery life, which I find very interesting. So when I click on mine, it tells me I've cycled 69 times and my battery health is 88%. It also tells you the temperature of your hard drive, your CPU, all the enclosures, the memory bank. It gives you a very detailed notification on what you're doing and how much system resources you're using. I think it's a great program. Definitely a must because it's not, on Windows you could go to Task Manager and see everything. It's a little different on the Mac, and this is a great tool to use for that. Now, it's not free. They do have a free version, and they also have a paid version, so you could go try it out, see if you like it, and you could end up buying it. But that is my pick, iStat and iMenu for the Mac.
Cool.
What is yours, Suncat?
All right, so my pick of the week is a application called PC Decrapifier. Earlier this week, I went to Rent-A-Center to get a laptop so I could have a laptop with me and do things such as video editing while I'm on vacation there in New York with you for Blog World. And I need to get rid of a lot of stuff that it just comes with. And anytime you get a new computer or you have a computer that you've had for a long time, it just builds up a bunch of junk on there. And you just need some way or an easy way to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the ways you can get rid of it is with a program called PC Decrapifier. That's the name of it. It's a pretty interesting program. It's so easy to use. All it does is it'll search through. It'll find certain startup items, menu items, and install programs that it'll automatically remove for you. It's very easy. If you've had a computer that's brand new, if you have a computer that's old that has a lot of junk on it, you can use it to get rid of stuff on there. Let me see if I can find screenshots for you. It's very easy to use. One thing that I like really about it is that you can actually create a restore point before you make any changes, which is really helpful. So maybe you remove some stuff, but then later you find out that, oh, I actually needed that. Well, you have a restore point to go back from, which is really cool. But then if you want, you can just easily remove any sort of items that you have installed. You just check off the boxes. They're right there. It's so easy. You click next, and it'll automatically uninstall all of those programs for you, making it really easy to remove a whole bunch of crap from your computer. It's really easy. You can just go to PCDecrapifier.com.
And it's free.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Very good pick, Suncast. Thank you again for hanging in there with me. Suncast is coming to New York in a couple days. We're going to be getting ready for Blog World, so it's a little hectic here. But we should have the show up by the weekend. You can go to our website, guysfromqueens.com, and download the show there. We're also on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere you can imagine. So definitely follow us on all these services. It helps us out. And we'll see you all next week on Tech News Weekly. Good night, everybody.